Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May 11th, 2021 public hearing, public meeting of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. I will call the roll. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Commissioner Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Letfi.
Here.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Okay, we're all set.
Great, thank you. And welcome everyone to the May 11th public hearing and public meeting. Today we will hear new applications for work on designated properties, and we will also review revised proposals for applications that have already had public hearings and for which the commissioners have heard testimony and given comments. And the applicants will be presenting revised proposals in response to those comments. This public hearing and meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. If you would like to watch the proceedings, please visit our YouTube channel to watch the live stream. If you would like to testify on any of the hearing items later today, please join the meeting at the estimated time for that item as shown on the hearing agenda, which can be found on our website. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through our agendas today.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We're going to start with the Preservation Department agenda with a public meeting item. This is item number 1, LPC 20-09908, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 1242, Lot 1, 959 Sterling Place in the Crown Heights North Historic District 2. This is an open area on the same lot as a Romanesque Revival, Gothic Revival style institutional building designed by Mercy and Thomas and built in 1888 to 89, with later extensions designed by William Kennedy and built in 1911 to 13. The application is to demolish a portion of the existing building and reconstruct the exposed facade and to construct a new building with excavation and a curb cut. This was last presented at the public meeting of March 16th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. And please note that at that public meeting, the commissioners reviewed prior revisions to the application for a new building on an open portion of the lot, again, presently occupied by the Hebron School building. The commissioners continue to be supportive of constructing a building on this lot and following a campus model for the development. Most felt that the adjustments made to the building design improved the campus feel, helped to reduce the massing, and created a better transition to the adjacent row houses, and that the materials were more harmonious within the larger historic district. However, the commissioners still felt that the building design needed further refinement, specifically by adding more masonry at the ground floor openings, restudying the connector, and improving the relationship at the back of the building and the gable ends to the historic building. Commissioners also asked the applicant to pursue further reduction in size, particularly at the eastern portion of the building adjacent to the row houses, with a suggestion to lower it by floor or set it back, and to consider additional articulation at the west portion of the building. The applicant team is here to respond to these comments with the revised proposal after we open the proceedings.
All right, thank you, Corey. So commissioners, I've sent you all a request to unmute yourself so we can open the proceedings. And first, I'd like to note for the record that Commissioner Jefferson is recused on this item and is not present. And with that, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open and the applicants may begin.
Morris, you're muted.
Sorry. Good morning, commissioners, Chair Carroll and staff. Morris Adjemi, sorry about that. I'm here with Tom Lewis and CJ Anderson from my office, and Misha Hunter and Judith Saltzman from Lee Saltzman are also here in case we need their testimony as well as ownership. I just want to go back and start with just a quick overview and then go through the changes we've made. Here's a bird's eye view of the site. In the next image, you'll see what what we presented in October. We were asked to reconsider the scale, break up the length along Sterling Place, look at the height relative to the townhouse, reconsider the ramp location, emphasize the campus approach, and the use of masonry. In the next image, this is what we presented in March. We reduced the overall massing and square footage by about 14,000 square feet. We relocated the ramp and reworked the massing in general. The commissioners felt that this was an overall improvement, but we were asked, as Corey mentioned earlier, to look at the ground floor to make it less commercial. Again, take another look at how the eastern side of the building interfaced with the townhouse. Again, to reconsider breaking up the massing, or sorry, the length of the building on Sterling Place, and further articulate the rear facade, as well as looking at the connector. In the next few slides, I'll show you step by step what we did, and then go through the facade elevations as well as the massing. So first, we took a look at the ground floor. We extended the masonry piers down and added a brick bulkhead, so to reduce the commercial look of those of the ground floor fenestration. Next, we pushed back the top floor on the eastern portion 10 feet on the Sterling Place elevation, and 5 feet on the eastern side, which is adjacent to the townhouse. And we have a few images that show that makes a pretty dramatic change. And so we were happy about that. And that was about a 2,000 square foot reduction. In the next slide, we introduced a recess on the western portion that was slightly different than the recess or balconies on the east, but we felt that this reinforced that campus approach, having similar but different ways to articulate the facades. In the next image, you see that you can't see, but I'll show you in a second. We added some depth to the overall organization of the facade, as well as the infill portion, which I'll give you the details about those dimensions in a second. And then we were asked to look at the elements which wrapped onto the Sterling Place facade, which appeared to be stuck on, and we eliminated those and modified the roof line there as well. And then the last piece we were asked to look at was the connector. We introduced a shed portion to reduce the overall height or impression of the overall height of that connector. And that was a popular or a common element, as you can see on Park, on the existing Hebron School building.
All these three. Okay.
The three proposals are shown here, starting from the left, which was shown in October, what we last showed in March, and then what we're showing now. And I believe the overall changes that we've made are significant improvement to the overall massing, as well as how it fits into the context. And the next, these are the two elevations of Sterling Place, and I'll show you the north facade in a second. On the top was what we showed at the last meeting, and at the bottom, what we're currently proposing, working from left to right. First of all, you can see the change to the ground floor, which extends all the way across the Sterling Place facade, as well as on the north facade. We also introduced the slot on the western side, the shed roof in the center, and then a significant change to the roof scape on both volumes, but particularly on the easternmost side, where we've both pushed it back and sculpted the roof in order to lessen the difference between the heights of the proposed building and the townhouse just to the east of the drive. And again, on top is what was proposed in March and what we're proposing now below. The tower elements with the gables on the ends. We're projecting about a 1 foot 4 inches before. Those are projecting 2 feet from the facade, the infill in the middle. And we've also added some additional articulation with the pilasters that are proud of about a foot from the facade. And we'll go through a series of before and after. The before images are from the March presentation from the corner of New York Avenue and Sterling Place looking east. In the next shot, you can see the introduction of the recess here, as well as the changes to the ground floor, which wraps around the entire facade, all facades, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. This is the north facade, and in the next image, you'll see that we've recessed the center portion, as well as created further articulation in the center of the infill. And as I said before, it's 2 feet, the towers are 2 feet proud of the facade, and the pilasters are 1 foot. And then this is further back. This is just west of New York Avenue, still looking east. You can't see the effect on the eastern block, but I'll show you in a future image. But here you see again the recess on the western portion, which helps to break down that massing. And then in the next few images, here's a view looking west, and this was the previously proposed massing for the eastern portion of the building. In the next view, you can see that was significantly reduced by both pushing back the top floor as well as sculpting the mechanical screening in the roof. And then here's another view looking more or less north at the slot between our proposed building and the townhouses, which will be the drive and access to parking. But here you'll notice the effect of the reduction to the top floor and setting that back as well. And I think in all of these images, you see the changes to the ground floor and lessening that commercial look. Here's a view of the connector piece as proposed previously. Again, you see the ground floor, and you'll see the changes to both in the next view. Here, the introduction of the shed roof with the loggia, as well as the change to the fenestration on the ground floor. And then on the right, you can see, there's the section showing how the loggia is situated in front of the lobby volume and the roof above. And then there's some details in the next image here showing the changes that we just discussed.
Okay.
And then we have a few more images. So some of these are not as dramatic just because the building's mostly covered by the existing structure. So here's a look south on New York Avenue. You can see the building on the right. There's just a little bit of change on the upper floor in terms of the articulation on the western side. And then the next image, again, similar changes are visible, but very slight from this viewpoint. And we have two more here looking south, and we accentuated the recesses, but it's covered by the building. And that's it. We do have additional information if you'd like me to go through materials and detailed drawings as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Morris. And we do have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum, followed by Commissioner Bland.
What is the intention of the relationship between the brick that is chosen for the building, the main brick, and the Hebron School? Is it meant to be lighter, meant to match? What's the idea there?
The Hebron School is darker than what we're proposing overall. However, at the ground floor, we chose a darker brick, which we think picks up on the color of the Hebron School.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Bland.
Unmute. Well, that was my question. And I'll go a little bit further and say, I think it's a little too red still, but I guess that'll be in comments as well when we get to it.
Sorry to interrupt. If you'd like, I can show the actual brick samples because I do think it reads a little hotter than the actual brick color that we're proposing.
Well, if we've had 2 questions on that subject and no other so far, maybe we should look at that.
Okay.
Okay, let's delve into it. Whoops. Okay, there we go.
But where's the?
So here we have, this is the overall color palette. We do have another drawing that shows where the materials are proposed on the building.
So that is the color palette with the materials. Right, so that is 1 and 2 takes place here as well. Then the 3 is taking place over here. And then the metal is taking place on top. And
Right,
then
but I guess the question might be, how does it compare to the Hebron brick? Now, the Hebron brick, of course, is old, 100 years old, and it's maybe not been cleaned in a long time, but nonetheless, it appears to be quite darker.
Yeah, and I believe a little browner as well.
Yeah. So we can't compare it right here. You don't have a sample of it, I guess, but anyway, just a thought, Morris. Maybe we don't need to drill down into it too much. My other question was, these windows at the lower level now don't look so commercial, but what are they? Are they sliding doors out to patios, or what are they?
There are a combination. There's an areaway in front of the building on Sterling Place. On the left side, we have swing doors as a pair of doors. And then on the right side, we have both windows and some doors that come that provide access.
And access out into a private terrace or something like that?
Private areaway, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. As you know, we have received letters since the last public meeting is generally opposed to the project. And we have also received some letters since the revised proposal was posted on the website, and we've gotten additional comments on the revised proposal. So I'll ask Rich to just summarize those. You know, they have all been distributed to you, but Rich, please go ahead and summarize it for the record.
Sure. So we received nearly 300 letters in opposition since the March 16th public meeting, including from Councilmember Cornegie, Community Board 8, the Crown Heights North Association, several preservation advocates, Friends of 920 Park Place, and individuals. And again, all letters since the March 16th meeting through Monday at noon were shared with the commissioners.
Yeah, and you know, just again, many of those came in before the revised proposal was posted, and some of those were since then, but those are all in your folders. Okay, any final questions? All right, I don't think we have any questions, so we'll go ahead and move to our discussion. The commissioners, I'm starting to request to unmute you all. I'll look for that to accept that request. Okay, so as was presented and as Corey described, after the first public hearing, we had a consensus among all commissioners that the development of a building or buildings would be appropriate on this site, and that the campus approach was an appropriate approach. But we had asked the applicants to restudy the height, massing, siting, and materials. And at the last public meeting, I think most commissioners felt that the adjustments had significantly improved the building's relationship to both the school building and campus, and the surrounding apartment buildings and row houses. And several of you had some remaining concerns, including the base of the building and its reading is too commercial, the language of the connector, the height of the eastern building adjacent to the row houses, and the design and articulation of the front and rear facades. And so the applicant today has presented responses to each of those concerns. And I think that many of them have been successful. So let's go ahead and have the conversation, and we may even have some new thoughts having seen the proposal today. Commissioner Goldblum, I think last time you felt it was going in the right direction in terms of general massing, siting, and design, but you felt that the height of the east building should be lowered or set back to transition to the row houses as the buildings across the street do. And I think you also felt the rear facade needed more design work. The gables weren't really integrated into the design. And I think you were comfortable with the glass connector, but also not opposed to them rethinking it. So I think if you could start with the conversation and let us know where you are today, that would be great.
Very good. Thank you very much. Could you go to the view, please, from Sterling Place looking back? The one where you see the townhouses in the foreground? I'm sorry, that may not be Sterling Place.
Is there a slide number?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
Looking west with the townhouse to the right.
Right, exactly.
Keep going back.
Yeah, it's back.
Keep
It's
going.
back a ways.
2 more from there.
There we go. One more. Well, the current version of that.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, great. So yeah, thank you for that summary, Chair Carroll. I think that the project has improved. I think that it is appropriate in general terms. I think that the stepping down in scale is contextual. It handles mass in a way that is similar to the way that mass is handled in other buildings in the district.
Michael, can you just stop for a minute? So anyone who is not a commissioner, can you mute yourself? Because I think we're getting some feedback and I want to make sure that we can hear you clearly. Okay, go ahead.
So anyway, I think the massing is treated contextually. I think it transitions much more successfully to the neighborhood. I think that the setback was very effective in that regard. I think that the improvements to the ground level were significant, and they again are much more evocative of the way all residential apartment buildings hit the ground in this area. So I think that the ground level modifications as well have improved the project and made it appropriate to the district. I think that the modifications of the mass of the taller building was also very successful. That the introduction of that notch has an interesting way of relating to the building across the street, which is a courtyard C-shaped building, and I think that too is an effective way to tie the building to the neighborhood. And interestingly, all of the changes made in mass and in detailing have worked to differentiate the various pavilions from one another and to create that sense of campus and move away from that sense of megastructure where we started. So to that extent, I think that it has really shown the modesty and flexibility of the applicant, and I think that it's worked to the benefit of the project in terms of its contextual appropriateness. I think that the work on the side facing the Hebron School has been effective as well. I think that because it's viewed so obliquely, even though the changes were relatively modest in dimension, they have had and they will have a fairly significant impact on the sense of depth and the kind of historic responsiveness to the existing building that I think some people were were talking about at the last presentation. So I think that too is appropriate. I think that the entrance pavilion, it's again, I mean, I think as architecture, it's not as interesting as the first go around, but I think as a neighborhood gesture, it's much more appropriate. I think it's very typical to the kind of thing you would see in a 1920s era, walk up or, early elevator building, and therefore is appropriate. And I think that the connection to the Hebron School architecture is also significant. The only thing that I would suggest that the applicant work on with staff is the brick. It's clear from the presentation that the intention of the design is to have each of the three pavilions have a slightly different color and texture and feel to differentiate them. It's hard for me to tell from the renderings and from the photos of the bricks that differentiation will be discernible. I worry that it's too close to each other, in that it might look like, hey, we ran out of bricks on job one, so we could only get bricks on job two that were close, but not exactly the right match. So I would suggest they work with staff to look at that. And also, I think this is an appropriate situation where a panel on site of a sample might be a good idea for the applicant to put up with on site, and they can look at it next to the Hebron School. I think that relationship is very important. I don't think it needs to copy it. I don't think it needs to match it, but it should definitely complement it and interact with it in a way that the architecture is interacting with the school. So in general, I really kudos to Morris and to the team. I think that this is an appropriate scheme, and it's come a long way. And it's hard for an architect to modify their scheme this many times, but I think it's yielded a much more appropriate, successful result that integrates well with its context.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, I agree with Michael completely. Morris must have been cringing the entire time that he's had to redesign this thing and redesign it. But as far as I'm concerned, they've really hit the mark here. I guess I'm not as concerned about the brick, because I think the shale brick is always going to come out because of the shadows that are created in the surface. It's always going to seem like a darker brick. However, what I would say is, because they've changed the massing enough, they'll probably save enough money that they should take that money and clean the school building, so that we know what that actually looks like. But I agree with them. They take a look at the brick with staff, put some sample panels out on site, and really get that down and make sure that there is a difference. The articulation on the school side is really perfect. I mean, with just a 2-foot change in the articulation there, it's made all the difference in the world. I think this is very, very successful.
All right, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Chen, I think last time you specifically said you wanted to see the end building, the eastern building, lowered or set back, and felt that the other facade masses could be broken up further with more articulation. So are you feeling that they've addressed those issues with their revised changes?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that I'm in agreement with the two Michaels, the two commissioners, that this is in the hands of a very capable architect, and they have done a lot of refinements, iterations to get to where it is, and it has gone much more refined and fine-tuned. And I think that the comments about working with the staff to further drill down to the details will be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland, I think you were feeling like very comfortable with it last time, but still I think also wanted to see some adjustments in the height at the eastern end.
Right. It's always good to be reminded what I did feel like last time, so thank you. I think all of us are thankful of this new turn, Sarah, where you remind us some of what's, because we see so many things and time spans between them. I think the big move that really kind of unlocked this, for me at least, was the separation of the building into two buildings rather than one mega building. So that was the big move that was made last time. The things that have been done since we saw it in March, I would say are significant tweakings, but nonetheless, the big idea is still there. And I think that's a good thing. It's been said already. Michael Goldblum has said it in very extensive remarks. I don't need to repeat them, but I'm in agreement generally with those remarks. I do want to go back to the brick issue. I think a very bright orangey brick will make the whole complex stick out much more than it ought to. It ought to settle in and feel very comfortable. The architecture is clearly contextual, contemporary, if that's a term, and it will not be confused with something that's older. But nonetheless, I think the way to make it fit in even more in this very settled part of Brooklyn is to make the brick very, very close to the Hebron School. And I grant that the Hebron School may be darker because it's not been cleaned, and so forth. So I support the idea of bringing brick samples at some scale to the site to test it out. That would be something, in my judgment, that would be done with staff. And the idea of differentiating the different buildings or pavilions from each other, I think is a good thing. But discernibility probably also is important to be sure we can see the difference. But if it goes in the bright orange direction to see the difference, I would oppose that idea. So I think it needs very careful consideration now of the brick. Otherwise, I just want to say also that on our behalf, if you will, but also on behalf of the architect, who has always been, not just in this project, but in many more that he's brought to us over the years, flexible in terms of working with the comments that we give him, sometimes at odds with each other even. And I think, these comments, this is the third time around, but it's a very big and important project to get right. And I think no loss of architectural integrity here at all. In fact, I think the architecture fitting into its context, which is a key issue here, is how you judge this project. And I think the changes that have been made over these two iterations are all to the better. And I believe that the architect would feel that as well. So with that, I'll be happy to vote in the affirmative that this is an appropriate new addition in this district.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, I think last time you also felt the big moves to break it down into two parts was successful, but you specifically raised the issues about how the building meets the ground and felt that it looked very commercial and needed more masonry. And I think you were sort of mixed minds on the connector as well. Commissioner Lutfi, you there?
Yeah, I had to be unmuted.
Okay.
I just want to reinforce what all of the commissioners have said so far, which is it's a pleasure. It's almost a relief to when we work with an applicant and an architect that come to the table in earnest and are receptive to our input, even if we ask them to come back several times. We really roll up our sleeves, and it's wonderful to be in a situation where we're working with an architect who is doing exactly the same thing. And as a result, this exchange that happens produces a better product. And that's what we have here. All of these refinements and modifications have really further enhanced this project so that it fits together cohesively. As Michael said, the elements within the project read well, not only as a unit, but also as separate buildings, and it speaks to the neighborhood context much, much better. I think the changes on the east side, pushing back above the 6th floor and removing the gables were a fantastic move. On the west side, I think, improving the articulation by recessing the center was a great move. I do think at the base, the project works much, much better now. Having more brick, smaller windows is much more contextual. I feel much better about how it's reading. In terms of the connector, which I didn't have as much of a problem with, I have to say it's fine that it's recessed. I'm not in love with the slope, but if everyone else is okay with it, it's okay with me. And I do think it makes sense to just work with staff on this issue of the color so that it's to ensure that it speaks properly to the existing building. And of course, I can support this.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Gustafson, I think you also last time specifically talked about the first floor readings to commercial and that the building on the east end was about a story too tall. So how are you feeling now?
Let's start with this. Even I know the applicant's been back several times. Let's go back to day one. I think the first proposal was very, very good, and the reason I think is that it wasn't overreaching even from the beginning. It was a sincere effort to meet the appropriateness standard from minute one, and I think, as Fred pointed out, for this particular site, context is everything. And I know that we have focused on what may seem to be some details, but the details really, because of the size of the structure, the details, they matter. They get repeated, and they're in great magnitude because of the size of the building. So, and all of those contribute to making that relationship with the existing structures work. And I think it really does take cues from the existing structures in a very, very detailed way. The applicant's been responsive to every single issue that we raised. I can't even begin to imagine it being inappropriate. So I'm on board.
All right, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron, I think you had concerns about the general direction last time, and I think felt that it was, in a way, becoming less of a campus because of the typology was becoming more residential. And I think then you had some siting and massing questions last time. So how are you feeling today?
Let's see. I think I'm really convinced by the other commissioners' assessments, and I can, I don't know that my own analysis last time has changed significantly, but I'm also convinced now that this is, and as I'm kind of more used to seeing it here and understanding what others have said about the contextual nature of the thing, I'm convinced that it's appropriate, and I don't really have much to add.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith, I think you had also sort of three specific concerns: the ground floor, reading of storefronts, the commercial nature of the glass connector, and you also felt the rear facade needed more articulation. So with the changes that have been presented today, how are you feeling?
I think they're a great improvement. I think it was heading in the right direction last time, and I think that with the changes they've made now, it's really become quite appropriate. I think setting back the mass on the east facade has been a huge improvement, and adding the brick at the ground floor. But I think especially for me, the rear facade that faces the Hebron School had read such a flat facade, and just the simple articulation of that 2 foot in depth has made a huge difference. So I'm in favor of it, all the changes. And I agree that they should work with the staff on the brick color to make sure that it's not too orange. And I noted that the mortar color has been selected to match the brick, which makes it more modern. But I wonder if in some locations they might consider a contrasting mortar color just for variety. That would help differentiate all the different masses. But they can work with
that may
staff
be
on that.
something. Okay, that may be another way to make those differentiations more discernible. Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Chapin? Sorry, Commissioner, I think, did we lose her?
Coming and going.
Okay, I think she has stepped away. So I think that is everyone, and I think we have a consensus to approve with the modification that they continue to work with the staff on the brick and mortar samples on site to ensure that the differentiation between the parts are discernible, and that together all of the materials have a relationship to the school building itself. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make that motion?
Sure. Regarding 959 Sterling Place, the application is to demolish a portion of the existing building and reconstruct the exposed facade and construct a new building with excavation and a curb cut. I note that the scale, style, materials, and details of the institutional school building at 920 Park Place are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Crown Heights North Historic District 2. I further note that the proposed new building will be located on an open area on the same lot as the designated building. Finally, I note that the surrounding blocks feature a mix of low row houses and large apartment buildings of 7 stories or less, and few institutional buildings and street frontages of less than 300 feet. I recommend approval, finding that the existing south addition to the designated historic building has been altered over time, contains no significant architectural features, and is in a deteriorated condition. Therefore, demolishing this portion of the building will not diminish the special architectural or historic character of the building or of the historic district. That the new wall enclosing the area where the removed south addition used to be will feature brick to match the brick on the historic building, punched masonry openings, cast stone sills, splayed brick lintels, and 9/9 metal double-hung windows, and will be consistent with the materials and fenestration of the historic building. That the proposed new building will be located on the back portion of the historic building's lot, which fronts on Sterling Place. And therefore, the primary reading and views of the historic building, as seen from Park Place and much of New York Avenue, will not be diminished or blocked. That the new building's siding and massing will preserve the open space and retain views of the designated historic building, including the chapel and its stained glass, through a newly landscaped green space in the center of the block. That the proposed building's scale and massing is similar to and compatible with the historic building, therefore will not overwhelm or detract from the historic building. That the proposed apartment building will be in keeping with the large footprints and tall street wall heights of the historic large apartment buildings found across the street on Sterling Place and at other intersections along New York Avenue. That the proposed building is shorter than the height of the historic apartment buildings across the street on Sterling Place. That the scale of the proposed new building is broken down by a 1-story connector between 2 masses of varying heights and designs, and the recesses in the street facades at the gable end, at the center of the western building, at the balconies of the eastern building, will relate to the recessed courtyards at other large apartment buildings in the district. That the transparency of the double height connector allows views from the street to the central landscape green space in the historic building, and the sloped metal roof and portico of the connector helps to reduce the scale and relates to the historic sloped roofs and porches at entries to the historic building. That the setbacks at the 6th floor further reduce the building massing at the eastern building and create a step massing from the rooftop equipment to the eastern facade, which will help the new building transition to the lower adjacent row houses. That the design of the proposed new building takes cues from the designated historic building, allowing the two buildings to visually relate to each other as a campus, which, given the context, is an appropriate design approach for the new building on this half-block site. That the hardscape and landscape features in the central open space and developed complementary design of the new building's north facades further reinforce the campus typology. That the varied roof lines at the new building will harmonize with the picturesque quality of the historic building. That the use of high-quality building materials, including patterned and textured red brick and gable roofs with patterned diamond-shaped zinc shingles, recall the materials depth and articulation of an existing historic building in a contemporary manner, and further help break down the building's mass. That the use of brick cladding and 1/1 windows within punch window openings reflects the dominant facade material and fenestration of apartment buildings throughout the historic district. That the proposed control joints on the primary facades are consistent with modern masonry construction and detailing, are required for long-term protection of the building, and will be concealed in reveals and finished to help blend with surrounding brickwork. That the setback footprint at New York Avenue aligns with the western facade of the chapel and retains visibility of the chapel from the south on New York Avenue, and the setback footprint on Sterling Place allows for an areaway at the sidewalk, reflecting a typical condition in this historic district at both large apartment buildings and row houses. That the installation of a new curb cut and driveway at Sterling Place will not eliminate any special paving and will be a discrete presence within the streetscape, and will provide a gap between the new building and the shorter adjacent row houses, which reflects a typical condition where larger apartment buildings adjoin lower row houses, and will further help the new building to transition to the row. That except for removing small areas of historic iron fencing for access to the new building, most of the fence at the property line will be retained. And behind the fence, there will be an areaway buffer between the sidewalk and the building's street wall. That the excavation will be designed and built in compliance with the Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed engineer to protect the adjacent buildings. And for these reasons, the proposed building will be appropriate for the historic district and lot. And I request that the applicant work with staff to refine the choices of the materials with an on-site samples.
Thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Blair,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin, I believe, is not with us at the moment. Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi, you're muted.
Sorry. Aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 9 in favor, 1 not present, and 1 recused, the motion carries.
All right, so that's approved, and please continue to work with the staff on the brick and mortar selections in the field. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and we're now going to, sorry, Sarah, we're now going to move to the public hearing agenda just to pick up one item before returning to the second public meeting item. So we're now going to do public hearing item number 1, LPC 21-03585, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1141, Lot 120, 131 West 69th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. This is a Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Tom and Wilson and built in 1891 to 92. The application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and modify openings at the rear facade.
And commissioners, the applicant has joined the hearing. We're just going to be giving him control of the application. So just one moment. Okay, it looks like he's unable to get remote control. So, Mr. Sherman, I can go through the slides for you if you want to just begin the presentation.
Oh, thank you, Edith. And sorry about the technical difficulties. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Sherman. I'm the principal at Del Center Sherman Architects, the architect for 131 West 69th Street. The project is essentially a small rooftop addition and a small rear yard addition. The front of the house is essentially remaining unchanged with some minor window replacements. Next slide, please. This just shows you the plot plan and the survey. Next, please. Yeah, tax lot photo of the original conditions and the existing photo of the house. Next, please. The dash line indicates our property there in the middle and some contact shots up down the street at the top. And at the bottom, you see the backyard. There is an existing 3-story dogleg extension at the rear, which we are keeping, though we're changing the fenestration. And other shots of the backyard just to give you context. Next, please. Diagram showing our attempt to hide all the additions from the line of sight on the street. Only the tip of the flue extension was intended to be visible. And you can see we had less success at completely hiding all of this than we had hoped. When you look from all the way down at the corners, you can see a bit more than what we intended. Next, please. The plot plan showing the existing donut and the various extensions into the backyards. Next, please. Existing drawing of the front facade and our proposed. Our rooftop extension is set well back, but you can see the heights in this elevation. Next, please. And the rear elevations, both proposed on the left and proposed in the middle and existing on the left. So our rear extension is a modest 2-story extension that would tuck into the corner of the rear facades, and with a small roof deck on its top. Well, let's go on to the next way. I think we'll be able to see in the renderings here a little more clearly what we're planning for the rooftop. It's a black stucco rooftop extension with glass walls at front and rear. Next, please. And this is a rendering of the proposed rear facade. And you can see our fenestration change at the existing extension. We're enlarging the windows, and between the windows are panels of perforated black metal that will hide ventilation. We have AC air, exhaust and makeup air intake going through that perforated metal. And then you can see our small 2-story extension tucked into the corner with similar fenestration. Next, please. I think we could maybe quickly go through the window details. So maybe you could advance the slides until we get to the photos of the mock-up. there. This is our mock-up of the structures that will be added to the roof. And that sort of fin that you see on the upper left is the extension of the chimney flues. Next, please. Now, these are long views from way down at the corner. So the photo on the left is what it looks like with a normal lens, but zoomed way in, you can see some of the mock-up. So these aren't visible from across the street, but from way down at the corner, you can actually see a little corner of the bulkhead and much more of the flue extensions. But that's with a super telephoto look. So the amount that you see from without a telephoto lens is quite small. Next, please. This is from the opposite corner. Again, you can see a bit of the flue extension from very far away with the telephoto lens, but you really have to get quite far away to see that. Next, please. Just some shots of the context. This is a neighbor's rooftop extension. And next, please. And another similar extension. Next, please. And a shot towards the rear, and you can see rear extensions that have been added and various other rooftop extensions. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
Just one question on your window system. Is the grill a range screen system? Do you have brick in the back of the grill, or is it, what's the construction?
Yeah, we could actually go to the details where you can see it is essentially a rain screen system. That is correct, and there is masonry behind the grill.
Okay, so the only issue for me is the typology and the change of typology. And you just
There's a detail there on the lower right that shows you the masonry and the behind the grill, as well as the ducting behind the grill.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony, and we may have more questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance first, and then get to everybody else. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Fabre, our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, to walk us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have some signups for this item. The first person that I will bring in is Kelly Carroll. Oh, actually, sorry about that. I see that there's a representative from the community board, so I will bring them in first. So Michelle Parker. You should be in the meeting now.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Michelle Parker from Community Board 7, Manhattan. The applicant came to our community board, and by a vote of 33-4-2-0, we approve the application as appropriate for the following 4 reasons. 1, the rooftop addition is truly a bulkhead and mechanical space. It brings the main staircase to the roof and provides a unified interior space for certain mechanical systems, but does not have any occupiable space in the way of a seating area, bedroom, or anything other than a pass-through space. 2, the fenestration on the revised lower portion of the existing L extension is sufficiently modest compared to the other schemes that have routinely been approved by CB7 and LPC, with ample dimensions of brick surrounding the expanded windows. The use of metal louvers as spandrels for ventilation between the floors in a dark metal material is an elegant solution to the problem of venting various equipment. 3, the rear facade proposal preserves the top 2 floors intact with punched windows and the common plane aligned with those of the neighboring buildings on either side. And we'd like to add a note of thanks to the applicant for illustrating what the neighboring conditions are for context. And 4, the partial infill of the L extension is in brick and modest in size, only 2 stories. And because it is only partial, it preserves the separation or line between the new infill and the original L extension. The door/casement window fenestration on the infill is not as elegant as that on the L extension, but is comfortably within the scope of what has been minimally acceptable in the past. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, I will bring in Landmark West. I believe it's Sean. So you should be in the meeting now.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee reviewed the applicant's presentation and hoped to find certain elements like existing plans, which we found absent, and found our plot plans, technical plot plans at least, to be abbreviated, omitting a lot of useful context. While there are many laudable aspects from environmental consideration in the form of new solar panels to added stone lintels and more regular window openings which tidy the elevations and remove non-original elements such as glass block, we found these were offset by the insertion of new foreign elements like the perforated spandrels, which arrive without precedent to the row block or district. However, our committee's main pause came from the added volumes at the rear. All row house sites of this Tom and Wilson block retain their express dog legs. If the rhythm must be violated, we would urge the applicant to consider reducing the rear yard double height breakfast room extension to just 1 story. Nobody has a stack of pancakes that would justify any taller. Thank you.
So now I will bring in Kelly Carroll. Okay, Kelly, you should be in the meeting now.
There we go. Sorry, I'm still, the pancake comment really caught me. Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. HDC has concerns about the proposed rear yard addition on this project. The dogleg rear yard extension is a feature of the Upper West Side and should be treated as such. The perforated metal spandrel panels proposed for this alteration, for the rear alteration, seem out of place on this building. It would be more appropriate to use brick as a material. We also question the proposed height of the infill addition. There seems little programmatic reward for such a visibly large addition. We strongly recommend reducing the height of the infill by 1 story at the very least, although eliminating altogether and retaining more of the historic dogleg configuration would be even more desirable. Thank you.
Thank you. That was it for our signups, and I do not see any other hands raised for this item.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, Mr. Sherman, would you like to respond to the comments that have been made?
Well, I would like to say that we are preserving the dogleg, and our addition is quite modest, and leaves the dogleg intact. If someone would want to remove the addition in the future and restore it back to its original condition, so we felt that this was not a destruction of a historic precedent, and the fact that it's quite a low addition makes it fairly hard to see from the neighbor's perspective. So the parts that are more visible, the upper floors, we took great pains to leave intact.
And to be clear, it does not project out as far as the existing L.
No, it's set back from the existing L.
Okay. And with respect to sort of the metal spandrel, the extended opening with the metal spandrels, it looked in your context photos like there were other, at least double height openings with metal spandrels across from you in the rear yard.
Yes, we did show several examples of similar fenestration and similar spandrel panels. And the comment about preferring it as brick, if we left it as brick, then there would be brick with visible grills cut into the brick, which seemed less desirable than our solution.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, I'm starting to request to unmute all of you so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Did you make the motion? Sorry.
I did.
Okay. Couldn't hear you. Thank you. Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So we have really three components to comment on. The rooftop addition, which has, very oblique views, minimal views from long distances, really of the extended chimneys. The two-story addition at the rear, nestled in and set back from the L, and which I think, is, if you look at the rear yards, the primary reading will be the L's, and this will be sort of recessive and not, I think, call too much attention to itself. And then the fenestration pattern on the L, and as you know, commissioners, for non-visible rear facades, we have tended to be a little bit more flexible on design details, as long as it retains sort of the scale and character of the row house. And so spandrels that evoke the separation of the floors or the location of the floor slabs has been something that we've found appropriate. In this case, the brick is actually remaining and the metal will go in front of it, and the applicant has shown other, at least double height, wider openings in the same context. So I think we've had a pretty complete presentation on this. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. For me, so far, this is make it easy for the commissioners' day. As far as the, from all compared to some of the things we've seen, first of all, the rooftop addition, it is truly minimally visible. I mean, extremely minimally visible. Two, we've got an L that, and if you see, as you see from this particular rendering, it really does. The new addition is small and respects the massing of the L, even though it's actually altering it. It actually is subsidiary to it, and so I think that's appropriate as well. And finally, I think the change in the fenestration on the L is fine. So I think the whole thing is inappropriate. And I also think that someone ought to really introduce Sean Grisanti to a real stack of pancakes.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Yes, I'm in agreement with those comments. And I just can't even, we may have seen, but it's really rare that we see this kind of approach to the L. And I think it's really to, sort of leave the form of the L pretty much intact. And I think that what they've done to the fenestration is fine and absolutely appropriate. And the addition, as you described, is sort of nestled in, is really, small by comparison and doesn't seem to sort of take away from the impression of the historic L. So I think that it's really successful, actually. And the rooftop addition, again, is very minimally visible and only in small parts. So I think this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Halford Smith.
I agree with my fellow commissioners with their comments. I think the handling of the little addition next to the L is very successful in that it's lower and set back. and definitely subservient to the original L, which retains its reading. I think that the metal grille detail is a very good one in order to hide the louvers. I think that, seeing the actual louver would be far more obtrusive than a nice perforated metal panel. So I applaud them for that detail. And I think the rooftop addition it's quite minimally visible, and it's set back and it's modest. So I find this application approvable and appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Holford Smith, and I find the project approvable.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree with everybody. I think this approach to dealing with tails on townhouses should be a model. It's something that I certainly have encouraged in other cases, and I think it allows for the retention of the reading of the tail as a distinct element. It'll keep the rhythm in the donut. I think that the spandrel treatment is also totally appropriate and much more preferable to seeing louvers or punches on a rear facade. I think we've certainly approved much more dramatic incursions than this, and the rooftop addition is generally follows the pattern which we have found to be appropriate in the past, and it's appropriate here too.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
All the discussion of donuts and pancakes is making me drool now. I think this is perfectly appropriate. The rooftop addition is modest enough and visually minimal. And I agree that the aspect of the addition, the earlier addition, is still maintained. I see nothing wrong with this.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with all the fellow commissioners.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
Commissioner Goldblum and I are on the exact same wavelengths today, I think. Color of brick in the last proposal, and now the treatment here of the L as a model. Perhaps, I mean, it's not the only model by any means, and I don't think we should go to the mat necessarily to save L's all the time, and we don't. But for those who might want to do it, I think this is a rather interesting way to do it, getting some breadth in the extension, but not entirely. So I hope the staff will remember this project and encourage other applicants in the future perhaps to think about this one. So it's all been said, and I'll agree with it all. And I think this is a very elegant solution to this problem, and very appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I agree with my fellow commissioners. Circling all the way back to John to say that it is nice to have yet another project that we can feel kind of a little relaxed about approving. I do think it's the minimal visibility and from the front is terrific. And I want to emphasize the fact that they kept the top two floors of intact was also a positive. I agree with all the other comments about the L and how they dealt with the HVAC. I also want to say I think it's the materials are a nice choice, and they from the bottom of the building all the way up to the roof, they work very well together, and it's a very cohesive facade.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
On all the four issues under consideration, I find it appropriate. It very well works out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we are all in agreement that this is appropriate by virtue of its lack of visibility, its modest scale and size, its sort of creative solution to respecting the original masses of the building, and actually sort of a creative solution to incorporate the HVAC into the design intent. So With that, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion?
In the matter of LPC 21-03585, 131 West 69th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions and modify openings at the rear facade. I note that the building's scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the work at the rear will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the proposed rear yard addition will abut an existing rear L and will be shallower than the L, and therefore will not encroach on the block's central green space, that the proposed rear yard addition will not rise to the full height of the rear facade or to the full 3-story height of the existing rear yard L, thereby retaining the upper floors and preserving the building's relationship to others in the row, that the proposed brick-clad rear yard addition will match the existing rear facade in terms of materials and finish, that the proposed modified window openings at the rear facade of the existing L will maintain the scale and character of the building as an individual row house, that the proposed rooftop addition will be minimally visible from an acute angle from the east and west, that only the top of the chimney flue extension will be minimally visible from directly over the primary facade, that the materials of the addition will blend with the roofscape, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building, the streetscape, or the historic district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion? Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
It looks like she froze up.
Yeah.
She froze. Okay, let's go to.
Second.
Okay, thanks. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 11 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved, and we will now move to the next item, Corey.
Okay, and we are going to jump back to the public meeting items to pick up the second one. That's public meeting item number 2, LPC 21-05867, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 572, lot 41, 14 to 16 Fifth Avenue in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is an apartment house originally constructed in 1848 to 49 as 2 Gothic Revival style row houses. And the application is to demolish the existing building and construct a new building. This was last presented at the public meeting of April 13th, 2021. No action was taken at that time. And please note that at the public meeting, a plurality of commissioners were supportive of demolition of the existing building and construction of a new building. However, some commissioners were against demolition, while a few remained undecided. Commissioners in support of demolition were supportive of the revised design for the new building, but asked the applicants to further reduce the height by removing another floor from the main portion of the building. And some thought that the details of the upper portion of the building could be rethought to make it more eclectic again. The applicant team is here to respond to these comments with a revised proposal after we open the proceedings.
All right, thank you, Corey, and we'll make a motion to open the proceedings now. Commissioner Bland, would you make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the applicants may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Paul Whalen, and I'm here to present to you our new lower design. I'm going to go through several images, first starting out with digital images of the building in its lower, with one floor removed, and it also has a few alterations to the top of the building. Then I'm going to show you elevations, and then I'm going to show you photo montages of the building in the neighborhood showing before and afters. Starting with this image though, you see on the left where we first started out with you on March 9th, we were 241 feet tall. Then we took off 18 or 19 feet on April 13th, and now we took off a full floor from the center of the building. So we're now over 28 feet lower than we were when we first met with you in March. Go to the next image, please. And here you'll see that dotted line removed in the next image. Tom, yeah, there we go. Thank you. Here you see, you'll see that all of these images will show a dotted line showing where we were, and then removing the dotted line to show you the new elevation. And clearly this, removing a floor does make quite a difference in terms of how the building ties in into its surroundings with lower neighbors to the south and our neighbor immediately to the north, number 20. Next, please. So then going through some digital renderings of the building and how it fits into the neighborhood. Here we are on the left where we were the last time we met with you, and on the right, the dotted line showing where we were and how we're lowering. And if you go to the next image, please. Here we are now, and I think that I actually really like the way that we have the sort of stepping going on of pieces that are almost the same size, and I think that's one of the really nice advantages of this, this extra floor that's been removed. Next, please. And then moving around to a view from the southeast, you can see on the left the floor that we removed in the center of the building. On the right, the mast that's been removed. And if we go to the next image, without those diagrams, just a more clear sense of where we are right now. And again, I'm really fond of this. Actually, I think this is a really lovely picturesque stepping that's been created with this proposed building and the surrounding structures. Next, please. And then moving around to the southwest, full floor removed again, removing quite a bit of bulk from the top of the building. Of course, everything steps down by 10 feet, 1.5 inches. Next, please. And there it is, nestled into its surroundings. Next, please. And then the view from 10th Street, looking downtown with the dotted diagram showing where we were on the right. And then if we go to the next, here showing how the step backs that we created at the top of the building fit in even more nicely with the step backs that are typical of the neighborhood, for instance, off in the distance at number 2 Fifth Avenue. Next, please. And we are maintaining the warmer buff brick as you all requested. We went from a grayer buff to a warmer, creamier buff that is more typical of the historic buildings on Lower Fifth. And we use limestone or precast as trim on that brick to bring down the scale further. Next, please. And then to go through the elevations, we start out with the east elevation on Fifth Avenue. Next, please. And then without that diagram, you see that stepping that I've referred to earlier. We've also gone back and we for a while, we removed this feature that you can see on the left was removed, and we thought things got a bit too simple, and there was a comment about that the last time we met with you. And so we've added that feature back in, which does, I think, help to make a nice connection to that sort of stepping pattern that we see with the surrounding buildings, that we would sort of, we're in a way weaving together all the surrounding buildings with our scale. Next, please. And then on the south elevation, this you'll see in a perspective. This is what you see on a diagonal as you're looking up, as you're starting to walk up from Washington Square. We've come down a full floor again, and we've also added this little feature back into the corner that we lost the last time we saw you, but we really prefer to have it back as we do on the right side in our latest drawings. Next, please. And there it is without the diagram. Next, please. And then from the west, showing on the right side again, a lot of massing that's been taken off the top of the building as we reduced by 1 floor. Next, please. And then the way that that would actually look within, if you were standing essentially inside the block, inside the donut, as it were, as you were all referring to on that recent project. just reviewed, looking across at this building with its very residential scale buildings coming right down to the ground. Next, please. And then on the north elevation, which is really only visible from a great distance because number 20 really blocks this view, we're now even closer to the scale of this building. But of course, and I'll show you later that there's an enormous difference also in the way that we relate to number 11, the Brevoort. Next, please. There we are, the lower building. And then these diagrams are, I've always thought to be interesting because scale is not just about the buildings on the block, it's about the buildings across the street and diagonally across the street. Here we have an elevation of the building that we're proposing at 213 feet with number 2 Fifth Avenue on the left side with its water towers going up to 228 feet. The water towers at the Brevoort go up to 220 feet, taller than where we are right now. And I think you get a general sense that we're really sort of within and below actually the scale of some of the predominant buildings within this 4-block area. Next, please. And then looking across the street at number 1 Fifth and the Brevoort, you see the outline of what we're creating on the right with this a proposed addition. And I think this, as I was referring to earlier, this nice stepping, which I think frankly will be a very nice contrast to the sort of bulkiness of the Brevoort, and is a lot less bulky in that it doesn't have, it doesn't fill out the whole block. I really think that this picturesque stepping block right across from the Brevoort will be a lovely addition to the neighborhood. Next, please. And then looking back at the streetscape diagram with showing how we fit in particular to the taller part of the street on the south as we head towards Washington Square, I think fitting in quite nicely with the scale, with really a mixed scale of all the surroundings, and really, I think, being a part of this neighborhood where what we like to do in a historic neighborhood like this is bring a building that has some of its own character, that brings a bit of its own story, but that at the same time is very respectful, that builds out of the vocabulary of the neighborhood, and we hope leaves it better than it was before. And I think that that's what we're achieving here today. And I think that people looking at this building in the future, if it is approved, will always think of it as a building that really is a natural part of Lower Fifth Avenue. Next, please. And then finally, this elevation, a sort of a larger elevation to give you a better sense of the detail, that this element that we've added back in over here, which helps our stepping notion of scale, and then in a very pale shadow and behind all this, the scale of the Brevoort, which is right across the street. Now, I'm going to quickly go through perspectives in the neighborhood. We were asked to keep these in. It's a little repetitive, so I'll go through them quickly. If you go to the next image, please. Here we are, because these are really collages, so it gives you a better sense of sort of what it would actually look like. And these are not before afters. This is just existing on the left, and then what we're proposing today on the right side. So here you see on the right side how we're extending the street wall created by number 20. Very subtle stepping above that parallels the stepping of number 2 off in the distance. Next, please. And then as seen from 6th Avenue looking east, of course, there's nothing visible right now on the left. On the right side, there would be a very subtle top that would come up, a very discrete top that would in no way challenge the primacy of the icon at number 1 Fifth Avenue. Next, please. And then looking northwest, here we're standing in front of number 2 Fifth, looking up, looking uptown, and also looking up a bit, seeing that stepping that I described earlier, and how I think of this lovely picturesque street wall that would be created that would step up and down and connect, in a sense, every building that exists on the site into one large assemblage. Next, please. Picturesque assemblage, I would say. And then looking north from Washington Square Park, existing on the left and on the right side, the very subtle addition of a stepped mass that really echoes the kind of stepping that both historic and newer buildings create in the neighborhood. Next, please. And then finally, the view from the sort of iconic view from Washington Square, where, as I mentioned to you, I often go on a beautiful day since I live just 2 blocks away. Here, the building would be hardly visible at all. And so really, I think one of the big stories here is that I think we're adding something that will be beloved, that people will like to get their picture taken in front of, but at the same time, we're in no way competing with the great icons of the neighborhood. We see our building as a very well-mannered addition to a beautiful streetscape. And I believe that that is the end of our presentation today. Correct? Yes, I think that's the finale. So we would love to get your comments. And we thank you for all your comments so far, by the way, including some of the more specific comments about adding a bit of the detail to the top of the building that we lost in our last round. I think those are great recommendations. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. And I do want to, as you know, we have, and you've seen in your folders, the letters that we've received in opposition and in support. And I'll ask Rich to summarize those for us.
Yes, so we received nearly 200 letters in opposition since the April 13th public meeting, including 14 letters since last Tuesday, specifically commenting on the revised proposal. Letters in opposition include a joint letter from Senator Hoylman and Assemblymember Glick, as well as from Village Preservation and several other preservation advocates and individuals. We also received 43 letters in support of the revised application. And again, all letters since April 13th meeting through Monday at noon have been shared with the commissioners.
All right, thank you. Okay, commissioners, if we don't have any other questions, we may just move into our discussion. So I am starting to unmute you or requesting to unmute you. So look for that. And, you know, Corey summed this up very well at the beginning where we were last time, that many commissioners felt that the existing buildings had lost their integrity as they exist now, and were found the demolition of the buildings to be appropriate. And several commissioners felt that the new building was contextual in terms of its height, massing, and design, although there were some who felt that the height should still be lowered, which has been presented today. Others had more serious concerns about the demolition of the existing building. And so we'll go ahead and start the discussion and see where we end up today. Commissioner Bland, you supported this last time, both the demolition of the existing building and the construction of the design of the new building. And I think you liked the warmer color of the brick. And so with the additional changes today, I think you did also, many people commented on the sort of the loss of the more exuberant top, which I think they've tried to, in their tweaks this time, tried to get some of that back. So I wanted to hear how you felt today.
Well, I think if we still had those 2 townhouses at 14 and 16, or even a semblance of their original character, we would not be looking at this building. But since, in my judgment, and I guess at least some on the commission as well, it's lost all of its integrity of that era. And therefore, I'm persuaded, easily persuaded that these buildings do not need to be retained. Therefore, my commentary remains on the new building. And I think little by little, we have brought the building down significantly, actually, in a way that it nestles in. And I think Paul was, this picturesque quality that Paul was pointing out with his red marker is very, very convincing. And I think what we have now is a beautiful, very literate sort of building that has the stamp of this architectural firm, to be sure, which is a good thing in this case. And to me, it represents kind of the best of urbanism, in my judgment. It's an infill building. You know, most buildings in our city and cities like ours, which are so built out and have a character, a vernacular character overall, most buildings should fit in. They shouldn't stand out. Every now and then we have a Guggenheim or something that needs to stand out and should stand out. But this is an example of a building that shouldn't stand out. It should fit in nicely. It should be very comfortable with its neighbors, which I think this is. I think the stepping is kind of brilliant now. The building's top is laudably more robust than it was in the last iteration, but still that loss of a story has helped a lot. And I think seeing it from the south, particularly from 8th Street, let's say, or even further south, makes clear that loss of another story is a very good thing. So all in all, I've been supportive of the approach right from the beginning, but I do think that it's gotten better and better. And I hope the architect, who is skilled enough on his own without our help at all, is still happy with the building, and it seems as if he is. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, I believe you also supported it as presented last time, but also lamented the loss of the more exuberant top, but felt that it was blending harmoniously within the district. And how are you feeling today?
Even better. Yet another project where the applicant has listened to the comments of the commissioners and come back with refinements that have improved the project tremendously. And I think in this particular case, really made it not only help it mesh better with the surrounding neighborhoods, the surrounding buildings, but I think it's actually much more cohesive. It was already good. It's even better now. So bringing down the height has worked very well. If we just go to page 7 at the moment, it's kind of like it gives you an interesting perspective, both of the front of the building and the view from from Washington Square Park. I think the way the building steps down is almost a little lyrical, and the fact that that first setback or that setback is closer to the building immediately to its left helps to again enable it to speak better to the building around it. And then on the north side, we have a better connection between the red brick building. I think putting that detail back on the left corner was a really, really smart move. And if we could just go to the facade for 1 minute more, what happens is that I think if you look at the way this building steps down in the front, with the the elements that are called back, your eye moves from right to left as you move down this facade to this little, again, putting back this little elements. The limestone continues, and then you have the balconies, and it's anchored at the base. I think it works really, really well. I'm happy. I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to the neighborhood as well.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, I think you also felt the same way last time, that it was fitting in harmoniously with the district. You were comfortable with the demolition of the existing building, but also talked a little bit about the loss of the exuberance at the top. And so how are you feeling today?
indeed, I'm impressed by the existing building, the existing 5-story building was highly altered. As there was no significant architectural feature in that. And this facade, the articulation of the facade, the base, the shaft, and the cornices, and the material that they use and how they compose this is masterful. I think they have made a step back, step up, and the picturesque quality that they try to impose causes kind of an ambiguity to me in terms of concept, but it's beautifully done. I think it's a beautiful composition.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I think Commissioner Holford Smith, you were also comfortable with the demolition last time and felt that the building had made some major adjustments to blend in with the district, but you have felt that it could be a floor lower. So now that they've lowered it a floor, how are you feeling?
I think that eliminating that floor made a huge difference in the design and the way it fits into its context. You know, listening to testimony, I wanted to make sure that I was really okay with demolishing those buildings. So I took a walk down Fifth Avenue, and really that immediate context really is of these sort of eclectic apartment buildings, whereas the side streets are certainly of the lower scale townhouses. So I was convinced that the highly altered condition of those townhouses would warrant their demolition. And I think that the changes they've made have been a great improvement to the design. Lowering the floor makes it fit in much more comfortably with the two buildings adjacent to. And bringing back that detail on the corner was a very good move to further articulate the facade and give it that sort of eclectic interest at the top. So overall, I can approve this design.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Chen, I think last time you also were comfortable. Your comments were very much aligned with Commissioner Holford Smith in terms of the design fitting in, but thought it also could be lowered a floor. So how are you feeling now?
Yeah, I agree with her, especially the site visit. And I think that much like the other commissioners, I think this is an improvement over last time. I really like the articulation of the details, the stepping back and bringing it down. And by lowering it, I think this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Commissioner Gustafson, you were not supportive of the demolition last time, and I don't know that we heard anything new today on that topic that would have changed your position, but I would like to hear how you're feeling at this point.
Yeah, you're right. I'm in the same place. I take no issue with the new building. It's terrific, but I don't really get there for the previously stated reasons I oppose the demolition.
Okay, thanks. And Commissioner Chapin, you were, I think, sort of on the fence about the demolition, but felt that if you could be persuaded, you would want to see a lower building, something more akin to the building to the north. So how are you feeling today?
Actually, I was not for demolition. In this particular case, I feel that the Midlock situation and the opportunity to restore the buildings, even though the facade has been greatly altered, was still there. And I don't feel comfortable in this case with demolition. As far as the architecture, of course, it's great. But if I were approving it, I would want to see it at least as low as the adjacent building or transitional between the two buildings. So I'm not really in a position to vote the application today.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum, I think you were sort of in the same place, having reservations about the demolition and also the height of the building.
Yeah, I have to, we started this morning with Mark throwing a word out for us to use today before the official meeting started, and I didn't think we would be able to use it. But if there's one thing that the Stern office has mastered, it's ubiety. defined as this quality or state of being in a place. I mean, they've really tapped into the nature of the design, the vocabulary in this district, in this area. And I think that the design is, as others have said, really, really wonderful. But I don't think that is enough to justify the demolition of the buildings. The applicant in the last go-round made the case that the precedents for demolition of multi-story buildings from the historically significant period was sufficient to justify these. In the end, when I thought about it, the more I think about it, the more I think that our practice has not been to permit the removal of multi-story buildings from, that are from the period of significance of the district. So even though these buildings have been significantly modified, their volume, the window openings, the materiality of the main structure is there. And I just don't think that it's, the one example that they cited was another townhouse where there was significantly more facade modification. It wasn't just stripped, it was kind of reimagined. So I really don't think this is a case where the buildings should be demolished.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, I think you also were not comfortable with demolition.
Not at all. And with regard to the new building, I think I agree with Diana that it should be much smaller. I mean, taking 10 feet off these buildings, this thing is like giving Godzilla a haircut. It's still Godzilla. But my more fundamental problem is with the demolition of the buildings that exist. They do retain an integrity. They've lost some detail, but show me another 100 buildings in New York City that have lost their details. As I said before, we put those details back on and they win awards. So I have a fundamental issue with the demolition. We don't preserve historic districts by demolishing the historic resources that are within them. So I'm totally against the demolition of these.
Okay. All right, thank you. So, and I think, this is, I respect opinions on all sides, and I think this is, why we do what we do and why we are a commission. Oh, Adi, please go ahead.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just to echo, while I have from the beginning thought that this building, and of course these architects know how to produce this kind of context in new design. So I've thought that the building, even in its taller form, was very convincing and successful in its own right. But I just have not been able to get around the problem with the demolition of the existing structure. And sort of unlike Commissioner Holford-Smith, I also walked the site a couple of times and was struck, yes, by the fact that there are so many street wall tall buildings, but that the fact that there was this kind of vestige of the previous era of the lower scale was even more, made more of sort of an impact on me than the notion that we really should retain that size and scale and continue to understand it as part of the kind of the diverse character of the avenue. So I'm opposed to demolition.
Okay, great. So I think, again, as I was saying, these comments are all really important and really helpful. And this is why we have a commission of 11 people, because this is important for furthering our discussion about what we do and what preservation is. in looking at the designation report and really thinking, this is, I think the first, or very early designation, I think the first one to have a sort of statement of intent up in the introduction of the report. It talked about, the important characteristics of the district. It also talked about the fact that there were less distinguished buildings and that demolition would occur and new buildings would be expected to fit in the historic, be approved and fit in the historic district. So I think, I am less, looking at the condition of these buildings, and I do think that we're looking at them as they are today, not what they might be, that the condition is so heavily altered and that they've lost their integrity to their period of significance. And so for me, I do think that they currently don't contribute to the district, and I could support demolition. I also, have spent time on Fifth Avenue thinking about this, and I think that one of the, the streetscape for me, and we talked last time about the ups and downs, and I think for me, I think the experience on this lower part of Fifth Avenue is really a street wall, sort of classically designed apartment building, street wall, predominantly brick, feeling with these picturesque punctuations. It's not, that there's a rhythm of up and down on every single block. And so I think in this case that a building that has, this strong brick, classically inspired facade will fit in very harmoniously with that street wall feeling on that sort of defines for me this portion of Fifth Avenue. And I think that the sculpted top punctuates that experience in a picturesque way, the way some of the other ups and downs go. So this one is going up instead of down, like some of the others. But I think that doesn't make it inappropriate. I think it doesn't have to be exactly what another building is to capture the spirit of the streetscape. So I think that the sculpted top contributes to the variety in the street wall, and that the street wall blends harmoniously. So I would go along with those who are supportive of the project at this point. So I think this is going to be a very split vote, but I think we have just 6. So Commissioner Lutfi, would you read the motion, and then we'll take the vote and see where we are.
Sure. In the matter of docket LPC-21-05867, 14-16 Fifth Avenue, Greenwich Village Historic District, an apartment house originally constructed in 1848-49 as 2 Gothic Revival style row houses. The application is to demolish the existing building and construct a new building. I know that the existing building was originally constructed in 1848-49 as 2 separate Gothic Revival row houses and experienced a major alteration in 1937, which internally combined the building into a single apartment house and eliminated significant architectural details, including the original windows, cornice, decorative brownstone, window lintels, and stoops. I further note that while the Greenwich Village Historic District is primarily characterized by low-rise row houses, the lower Fifth Avenue streetscape features a wide variety of building types, ages, and styles, including 19th century row houses, churches, and 20th century apartment buildings, and is predominantly defined by the large apartment building typology. I recommend approval, finding that the existing 5-story building has been highly altered and retains no significant architectural features, and therefore its demolition will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. That the modifications to the 2 original buildings did not include any significant early 20th century row house alterations, typical of conversions found in Greenwich Village, such as artist studio windows and revival style details. Therefore, the work will not eliminate any significant remaining historic fabric. That the proposed height and massing of the building will be compatible with other tall buildings within the historic district and will relate harmoniously to the streetscape on Fifth Avenue, which is predominantly characterized by taller building heights. excuse me, that the proposed facades are articulated in an arrangement of base, shaft, and setback cornices, recalling the typical facade composition of 20th century apartment buildings. That the uppermost floors of the building feature an asymmetrical and cascading composition of setback terraces, which breaks down the massing of the tower element and steps down to the shorter buildings at the southern corner of the block, and will not detract from significant views of 1 Fifth Avenue and other taller historic buildings which characterize this area of Greenwich Village. That the proposed materials palette featuring gray brick and limestone cladding and dark gray metal windows will harmonize with the masonry materials and finishes of buildings found within the adjacent streetscape. That the proposed detailing at the facades featuring Flemish bond brickwork, multi-light casement windows, Juliet balcony railings, and limestone keystones, coins, and fluted pilasters will provide a level of depth and articulation comparable to what is found on historic buildings within this district. That the materials palette and detailing of the tower portion of the building featuring stone cladding and balustrades distinguishes itself from lower floors by recalling the proportions of row house facades and serves to further reduce the bulk of the tower massing. That the fenestration pattern at the lower floors of the Fifth Avenue facade, composed of single and paired window bays, will reference the proportions of repeating bays that are characteristic of 20th century apartment buildings. That the fenestration of the lot line facades features a regularized pattern of window openings and are in keeping with the secondary nature of visible lot line facades within the streetscape. That the materials and details of the ground floor featuring a granite water table, lantern-type light fixtures, stone planters, paired entrance doors, and fabric sidewalk canopy are in keeping with the typical treatment of the ground floors of large apartment buildings on Lower Fifth Avenue. That the mechanical and elevator bulkheads are comparable in size and massing to rooftop accretions found on other tall buildings throughout this historic district and are clad in the same materials as the base of the tower, thereby integrating these elements into the design of the primary massing of the building, and that the proposed building will contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District.
All right, and Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Nay.
Commissioner Chapin,
Nay.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Nay.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Nay.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Jefferson, you're muted. Commissioner Jefferson?
Commissioner Jefferson, you have to unmute. I sent you a request to unmute. You should be able to hit OK.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
thought there was something wrong with my system. Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Luffy?
Oh, aye.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith?
Aye.
Okay, with 6 in favor and 5 opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved. And again, I thank everyone for your discussion on this item. This was an example of exactly what we all should be doing. So thank you all for your very thoughtful comments.
Sarah, could I just add something?
Yes, please do.
I don't remember a split vote like this. There could have been one, I know there was one very early in my tenure 12 years ago, but I don't remember one this close, so split. But I think it's such a healthy thing. And I just wanted to say that for all of us and anybody else listening, but also for those 5 who voted against it, very principled arguments against. And I think it's just a sign of great health for the commission. And I'm happy about my own vote, but I respect those that didn't vote with me. And I just think the whole thing is very healthy that we've had this conversation.
Agree. Thank you all. Okay, we'll move to the next item now.
Okay, and we're going to shift back to the public hearing agenda. This is public hearing item number 2, LPC 21-01526, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 189, Lot 46, 185 Dean Street in the Boerum Hill Historic District. This is a late Italianate style row house built in 1868 to 69, and the application is to alter the primary facade, replace windows, and construct a rear yard addition.
And the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation and you may begin.
Hello, commissioners. I'm Brendan Coburn. I'm the architect for this project. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So this is a Italianate row house project where we are fully renovating this building and seeking a certificate of appropriateness for a rear yard addition and some adjustments to the front facade. So the front facade will get its stoop returned, the enframement around the front door, the ironwork will be restored, and the building will be rebrownstone and lintels and sills returned to their original condition with a modification. The main portion of this certificate of appropriateness filing is the rear yard addition. So if we could move to the next slide. So this is a site plan of our proposed building. The existing site plan is down below, the proposed is up above. We are proposing to add a 2-story rear yard addition, which aligns with the adjacent full width rear yard addition at 187. Our building is, there is a typo on this drawing saying 16'6", but it is in fact 16 feet and does align with the adjacent structure. We are doing this as a sort of 2-story kind of modified T-porch, if you will, design. And I'll get into some of the specifics of the architecture in a moment. If you could go to the next sheet. This is our analysis of the existing block plan and donut, and you can see that 185 is highlighted in red, and we are just showing the relationship to the adjacent structures. This is a donut which has a significant number of 2-story rear yard extensions. I think they are by and large, maybe almost all of them are original to their buildings. They are mounted on a series of both Italianate and probably Greek Revival houses. And the exception being 187, which is our next door neighbor, which has a LPC approved addition from 2018. I think some of the houses on the north side of the donut there have had their additions modified quite a bit over the years. I don't know whether any of them were modified with Landmark's approval. I actually know that I've modified 3 of the row houses with Landmark's approval on this side of the street, but none of them included additions. They were all modifications to existing 2-story rear yard facades. So next slide, please. This is a blow up with an included Google photo of the rear yard extensions. You can see our building is highlighted in red, and you can see the existing 2-story extensions on that side of the block. You'll note that in every case, 2 floors, the upper 2 floors of the rear wall remain untouched. This is a model that we've followed ourselves. In this Google photo, 187 has not yet had its extension built. So that's missing from this image. Next slide, please. This is a view of the other side of the donut, which you can see is a sort of even considerably more hodgepodgey than the south side of the donut, with some taller buildings and shorter buildings. Again, most of them having a 2 and in some case 3-story extension on the rear facade. As I mentioned before, I think all of them, they all appear to be somewhat original, although on this side of the street they have been heavily modified. Next slide, please. I've just included the Sanborn maps going back to 1886, showing that as originally constructed, there are quite a few 2-story extensions. The row in which our house is was built originally with no extensions. You can see by 1904, the sort of bathroom little outhouse extension popped up on our whole row. And then not much has changed until the 2018 edition was made at 187. Next image, please. So here we are. This is just a quick existing plot plan and proposed plot plan, where you can see that we are proposing our 2-story extension aligning with the previously approved extension at 187. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is an axonometric, a diagrammatic axonometric, just explaining the massing of the existing rear yard extensions on this block. And ours is highlighted in gray. And so you can see the 2-story, the sort of the preservation of the upper 2 floors of this donut is very well established on this block, and then it's punctuated by a string of 2-story extensions and ours added at this point. Next, please. This is an elevation study of our proposed rear wall, and the building to the left, 187 Dean, is shown with its existing extension. We are proposing a design that is what I sort of like to refer to as a modified T-porch design, where we are using wooden pilasters, paneling, a wooden window system to create something that is a sort of 2-story loggia, where the spandrel of the second floor is expressed and the columns are holding up an entablature on the top of the house. And then the 2 brick cheek walls are expressed on the front, on the rear facade facing the garden, with the exposed side wall to the west being stucco and the small bit of exposed side wall to the east also being in stucco. Next. I have included here some examples of work that we have previously designed and had approved by the commission in historic districts. The 343 Clinton Street is an extension where we were aligning with the building to the left, not to the right. We used this same sort of T-porch approach to the design. This is on an Italianate building of probably 1863 versus ours, which is 1868. The building on the left, 108 Geralman Street, is on a corner lot and it's exposed, and it also aligns with the adjacent T-porches, the adjacent enclosed T-porches of that row along Henry Street. And I have just our drawing for reference of our proposed design for 185D. Next. So just a side-by-side diagram. Next, please. Just a brief description of the LPC site person and our extension in the back. Next. Just a diagram here. Next slide, please. And then a little photo montage showing the our existing elevation and the adjacent structure at 187, and then the buildings to the west. And then the lower photograph is just a photo montage, again, of the opposite side of the donut from our project, where you can see all of the sort of 2-story and in one case 3-story extensions, some of which appear to have been modified. Next. This is a diagram showing our that we have minimal visibility of the the parlor floor side of our extension through looking from Bond Street. So the photograph on the right is the direct photograph. The second is a blow up outlining what would be visible from that street. So you can see that it is in fact minimally visible from Bond Street. Next. Okay, now I will switch to the second part of our application, which is the restoration of the front facade, which by and large is being handled at the staff level. In this case, there are 3 things we are doing which require the commissioner's attention. If we could, so this is just the 1940s tax photo is on the left, the 80s tax photo and the present photo. The building was converted sometime in the early 40s to a multi-family dwelling from a single family dwelling. If we could just move to the proposed study. Okay, so we are seeing here the existing front facade and the proposed front facade where we are restoring the stoop and the enfrainment around the parlor floor entry. We're restoring the hoods on the windows. We are putting back in the segmented archtop windows and recreating in new stucco the pattern of the original facade. If we could move to a more detailed, one thing I will point out on this photograph, this is important, our building is on the extreme right. It is part of a set of 4, and then the set of 4 or 5 to the right was probably done by the same developer right after this first set of 4 were done. What I want to call your attention to is the doors on the adjacent 3 buildings to the left. Our client has asked that we copy the door configuration of the 2 buildings to the immediate left, but it is important to point out that the 179 Dean Street has the more appropriate doors for the front facade, which would be a late Italianate configuration. So that is part of our application, is for us to copy the door configuration of 181 and 183 for 185 rather than the 179 Dean Street. Next slide, please. This 180, actually this, I think you can go to the next slide. This is the rest of that row. Next, please. Why don't you actually just skip ahead, Scott, to the, yes, okay, so this is the detailed blow up of our proposed design. And the next 2 items I'd like to draw your attention specifically to, as they are what we are seeking approval for, is the addition of the projecting windowsill and brackets on the parlor floor. We are doing this because the client would like to have flower boxes on those brackets. We are proposing this solution because buildings on Italianate buildings on the opposite side of the street possess a detail like this. It is not original to the building, but we think it is an appropriate addition and in keeping with the idea of this house. The other thing we are proposing is that we would like to use black aluminum clad windows, Marvin windows for this project. And so those are the 3 things that are on this facade. If Scott, you could just skip to, yes. So this is the bracket on the building across the street that we are proposing to replicate on our building. And I think that is it for our presentation, unless somebody tells me I've forgotten something. And
okay. I think you've covered everything. I think we have understand the changes that are before us on the front, understanding that much of it is at staff level, and the change to the rear yard addition. If we have any questions, we can take those now, and that would flesh out anything you may have missed. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, no questions. So I think you were pretty thorough and complete in your presentation. So we'll move to public testimony. And if anyone is in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance first and then get to others. So I'll turn it over to Anthony Fabre now to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. So we do have a few signups for this item. The first person that I will bring in is Richard Alwyn. Richard, you should be in the meeting now.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You just have to state your name for the record.
Fantastic. My name is Richard Alwyn Fisher. I live at 183 Dean Street next to the proposed building. I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak briefly in opposition to the proposed extension at 185 Dean Street. The front facade is fantastic, and that will be great, and we're looking forward to that. But the extension at 187 Dean should not set a precedent, as it should not have been approved by Landmarks Preservation Commission due to its clear visibility from street level at Bond Street. This proposed extension at 185 would also be visible from Bond Street, as it extends at the 2-story level for 16 feet. The current extension at 187 consists approximately 2/3 at 2 stories, but 1/3 at 1 story. So this proposed extension would be approximately 1/3 longer in the 2nd story area. And I did show that was visible from Bond Street. The reason it's not massively visible is because there's already this massive 187 extension that is visible. If that one were not there, then this would be very visible from Bond Street. Neither of these extensions are in keeping with the depth and volume of the structures on this historical block. The axonomatic diagram shows that there is a setback on the 2nd floor, that this is expanding out beyond that. The photo montage page shows the 187 Dean Street yard completely walled in, because that had to be dug up to put some kind of a drainage tank in there. So in that sense, you lose all of the natural dirt and garden and growing room in the backyard. The 187 backyard is entirely construction and AstroTurf. Additionally, if the 185 extension were allowed, there would be no precedent to stop future extensions. The backyard areas would become the site of untrammeled buildings, structures, and concrete, to the sacrifice of gardens, trees, and nature. This would certainly affect the views and the character of the backyards, and potentially affect heat and airflow, water runoff, pests, and wildlife. I thank you for your time, your consideration, and your service, and please weigh the wishes of the residents who have lived in this neighborhood for quite some time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person that I will bring in is Chris Penta. Chris, you should be in the meeting. Just please state your name for the record. Chris, are you there?
Hey, can you guys see and hear me now?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My name is Chris Penta, and I live on the parlor, ground, and basement floors of 183 Dean Street with my 3-year-old daughter, Parker, next door to the building, and right below Richard, who just gave his testimony. First of all, thank you guys for your service to all of us on behalf of the people on this call and the countless others that don't even realize that you're looking out for them. I object to 185 Dean Street extension. It's using the 187 Dean extension as a precedent. 187 Dean should not be considered a precedent. It's an anomaly. It was approved without the proper community channel checks and based on misinformation supplied to the commission by the architects. Allowing 185 Dean to pursue a similar extension would add injury to injury. 187 addition has already impacted the aesthetic integrity of my home. I once had a view of beautiful backyards, trees, brownstones, and Bond Street, and now I look at a gigantic yellow wall the size of an outdoor movie theater. Actually, here, I'll show you. Here's the beautiful backyard, right? You guys can all see it. And the trees, and look at that. That was somehow allowed to be constructed on a landmarked block. That's the only backyard that doesn't have a tree in it because trees can't grow in AstroTurf. And I'm just concerned that that was allowed to happen without any neighbors knowing. There was no mock-up of it. There was no mailer. There was nothing. You just wake up one day and beautiful brownstone Brooklyn is neither brownstone nor beautiful. So let's hold another one of these meetings at my house. And I guarantee that none of the commissioners will be able to look at that with a straight face. It's more in character with a self-storage building by the airport than the neighboring buildings built 150 years ago. If the building on the other side that recently sold for the first time in a generation does the same thing, Parker and I are going to be living in this dark alleyway, which is clearly not an environment that I want for my 3-year-old. I'm not going to complain about my sunlight though, or the views or all the other things that are going to be destroyed by this, but I can't be silent about an obvious mistake in 187 that's now serving as a mold for destroying the historical, cultural, and architectural integrity of the neighborhood that this commission is in place to protect. So please, before any decision is made, come by and see it. It does not take a trained eye to have a visceral reaction to what is being proposed. 187 was an obvious mistake. The commission didn't have accurate information from but 185, you have the information to make a different decision. So please do that for me, for my daughter, for the trees, and for the countless others that will enjoy this neighborhood in the centuries to follow.
Thank you. So next up, I will bring in, I see some folks that are signed up, but their hands are not raised. So let me see who.
Right, so please raise your hand even if you signed up so that we can identify you and call you in the order in which you signed up. So if you are in the meeting and signed up, whether you signed up or not, raise your virtual hand.
Okay, so I do see that John Graham has signed up from the Victorian Society and his hand is raised, so I will bring him in. John, you should be in the meeting.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society of New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The presentation materials for this project appear to have changed following their posting and our Preservation Committee's review, with most of the work now being labeled for staff. We're unsure what proposed work is left for the commissioners to review. Nonetheless, we note our concern about the windows at the front facade. We object to aluminum-clad windows in small buildings of this type, and we note that this may result in the loss of the original brick moldings. Acetylated lumber is available for windows that will maintain the historic material and appearance and will outlast aluminum windows. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you. So I do see someone that I believe is Rosalie Hoffman, but the screen name is a little bit different, but I'll bring her in. I believe that's her. Rosalie, is that you? It's under Brown, Schwitzgable, and Hoffman. Rosalie?
Unmute. It's not, it's three of us. There's Thomas Brown, Meg Schwitzgable, and Rosalie Hoffman. We're all at the same computer today. We're all providing testimony.
Okay, so just to that's okay. I just need to clarify that each of
Okay.
you would have to speak separately, and
Right.
you would get your 3 minutes. I wasn't aware of that because the signups and the screen names are different from what I received, but that's perfectly fine.
This is our, we're
Um,
novices at this. It's our first time.
yeah, that no problem. Just state your name, and then I can start your time clock.
Can I make a request first? Can we get the picture from their page 13 of the presentation that was online? And the one they presented today was different. And they did a wide angle shot, but I can tell you what, it's the shot of the back with the 187 on the left, and then the subject 185 is in the middle. Can we just get that on the screen?
We'll put it up momentarily. We do want to keep the information of the meeting ID so that other people can tune in, but we can flip to that slide quickly while you speak and then go back to our...
If during the time it would be helpful, because it's like a picture's worth a lot of words. And if that could be flashed every once in a while, because this is what we're talking about. And I think it's important for the commissioners and all the people to see this, because it was in their presentation that was
okay,
online.
Mr.
I think it's time to start the testimony.
Sir, yeah, we need you to state your name for the record. We're actually not sure what your name is. Since you've been speaking, and we need it for the record.
My name is Thomas Brown.
Okay. You can go ahead and start your testimony.
Okay, I've been at 191 Dean Street for 34 years. It's pretty close to the about one door down from 187. And I submitted a letter to the commissioners, and I hope they'll read it. I didn't want to just read today because I know reading is less communicative than actually speaking. My guess is that by now the commissioners have realized that you've tapped into, with this application, a community angst. There's a quality of life issue. We're in the middle of an extension mania in the Boerum Hill Historic District. I'm sure you've all heard that change rolls like a brick, and I believe this application represents a clunk moment, because the way that the brick rolls on this one is going to set precedent. I'm a third generation restorer. Our facade is used in the online presentation as being something that they want to do. And we applaud the front, what they want to do. The facade restoration, that's great. But this 185 extension, I strongly oppose it. I think everybody that's going to talk here, other than the architect, opposes it. I don't even understand how the co-chair of HDC's Public Review Committee can propose such a grossly out of character structure. At the heart here is this 2018 extension. And I really, can you guys put the picture up of that? You know, have you found that picture that I was talking about yet? Because at the heart of what we're talking about today is a 2018 extension to 187D, which is shown on the left of this picture that I want to get on the screen.
I think we saw the picture of 187, and we will, at the end of testimony, ask the applicant to address the comments, and we will go back to the image then and thoroughly evaluate what you comment on today.
Okay.
So please go ahead so that we don't use up your time.
I appreciate that. We think that 2018 approval was made on false and partial and misleading information that was provided by the applicant. And you no doubt noticed the difference in level of response today from when 187 was up there, because nobody knew about it until it was under construction. And today, some people got the word, they passed it to everyone else because we've got this mania that's going on. There's something seriously wrong with the notification process. If there had been a full-scale mock-up, because you could see this plainly from Bond Street, everybody would have known. We'd have known something was up. But as it was, until the ground was broken and it was under construction, nobody knew it was even possible. The huge 187 extension triggered this requirement for a large underground water holding tank that further takes away any vegetation.
We do have to move on to the next speaker out of the three that are with the other two that are with you.
I would appreciate just a little bit more on this. This is probably one of the more important decisions that's going to be made by the commission.
So you're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which is much more than we allow per speaker. So that's why
a lot of it has been requesting the photograph that tells the story here.
we have already stated that we will bring that photo forward so that they can address your comments, but we do have to move on to the next speaker. I'm so sorry.
I want to support my neighbors and the community board and everybody else who has said that this should be denied. And I welcome any questions that anybody's got. I appreciate the time, and I'm sorry I overspoke my allotted 3 minutes. This is more than a 3-minute decision that's being made.
No, and we understand that, but there are many other people who want to speak. So if the next person can state their name.
You want Meg Switscable or Rosalie?
Yeah, whichever is fine. They're both on my list.
Coming up.
Am I next?
Yep, you're on.
Where am I?
I don't know. I don't see the picture. Can you hear
Close
her?
that. Close that.
You're going to have to just give your testimony, please. You're just.
Hello.
Yes. Can you please state your name for the record?
Meg Switscable.
Okay, thank you. You can begin.
Dear Ms. Carroll and Commissioners, my name is Meg Switscable. I've lived with my spouse, Thomas Brown, at 191 Dean Street for 34 years. The new construction of 187 and the proposed 185 extension completely overwhelms the historic scale of the block, which previously had no other extensions of this size. The large 187 Dean extension, plainly visible from Bond Street, went forward without neighbors ever being notified. The required landmarks full-scale mock-up was never done. The mock-up would have made it apparent how clearly visible the extension would be from Bond. It would have also made it immediately apparent that this rear yard extension would not comply with Landmarks Chapter 215. It's viewable from all of our yards, radically calling attention to itself and detracting from our neighborhood. As we were not notified and there was no mock-up to alert us, not a single community voice was there to counter what the architect presented. We didn't hear about the 187 extension until construction was already underway. We don't understand why, in our absence, the landmark board, with all its expertise, did not weigh in and stop this. Our gardens, what we believed to be a protected landscape feature, drastically changed for the first time in 150 years when the 187 extension got approved. Where there was once open sky and western sunsets, we now live beside a yellow stucco canyon. This was not supposed to happen. Additionally, these huge extensions apparently trigger building department requirements for backyard water runoff tanks. As a result, these yards will not be able to sustain trees of any significant size. They may additionally drastically affect the underground streams that feed the trees in the neighboring yards. These water tanks are structures, even if they are below the ground. So wouldn't these buildings require variance, being that less than 30 feet of yard remains? And what happens when the water tables rises? 185 Dean is requesting an even bigger extension using 187 as precedent. The parlor floor level of this proposed monster is actually 5 feet beyond the precedent 187 extension, and it has an additional 7-foot deck. You've seen how oppressive living next to the 187 extension is when our neighbors spoke and showed you. For 185 to build even bigger makes no sense. It's easy to see where all of this is heading. Ever-growing extensions on all buildings and the obliteration of green space for the entire historic district. This commission can use its
Thank you.
intelligence.
We have to move on to the next speaker.
Okay, we respectfully ask that you deny this.
Thank you.
She's coming. She's coming. I don't know. Is it okay?
Are you not getting the image on this? For some reason, there's no image coming.
So I'm gonna have to bring in the next speaker while you guys are ready to bring in your next person.
This is
Here I am, Rosalie Hoffman.
Okay, thank you. Can you please begin your testimony?
My name is Rosalie Hoffman. I have owned and lived in the property at 193 Dean Street for the past 45 years. I also am a city planner. I retired from the New York City Department of Planning in 1996 after 27 years. I spent the last 16 years before my retirement in the Brooklyn office of city planning. I contend that the LPC has enough reason to conclude that the 187 extension should not be considered a precedent, but rather an anomaly, and that the 185 rear yard extension should be denied. Both recommendations are based on the fact that, one, the neighboring property owners were never notified about the hearing on the 187 extension, and consequently were not able to testify at the community board and the LPC hearings. And two, that the LPC's examination of the facts and the consequential impact of the 187 extension was insufficient. For the LPC to allow the 187 extension to be considered as a precedent, and for you to also approve the 185 extension, which is even larger and more intrusive than is the 187 extension, would open the floodgates to rear yard extensions throughout the Boerum Hill Historic District. In my opinion, the LPC and the community board too, who incidentally denied the 185 extension application, should be the first line of defense, representing and protecting the interests and needs of the communities which they serve, rather than of a single property owner. With that said, the property owners in the Boerum Hill Historic District are calling for a meeting with the LPC to discuss placing a moratorium on rear yard extensions to allow the community, in consultation with the LPC, to decide what additional measures need to be established in order that a 187 rear yard extension is not replicated in any other yard in the Boerum Hill Historic District, and the district is protected from irrational, overbuilt, open space compromising rear yard construction. In addition, we are requesting another meeting with the LPC and the community board to discuss placing a moratorium on all landmark preservation applications to allow for the notification process to be revamped in order to ensure that neighboring property owners are notified.
Rosalie, if you can sum up your comments.
Again, had we in the Boerum Hill District been notified of the 187 extension, the proposal for the 185 rear yard extension may never have been filed, and we would not be standing here today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Okay, so next up, I do have Kelly Carroll that signed up. I will bring her in. Kelly, you should be in the meeting.
Okay, Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. In full disclosure, Brendan Coburn, the principal of the architects for this application, is on the board of advisors for the Historic Districts Council and serves as co-chair for our public review committee. His service is invaluable. Mr. Coburn did not participate in our committee's review nor our discussion of this item. Nearly 3 years ago to the day, on May 15th, 2018, HDC, me, testified against the size of the rear yard addition to this building's neighbor at 187 Dean, noting that if approved, it would be the largest and deepest incursion into the donut. It was approved and we were shown to be correct. We acknowledge now, as we did then, that there are other rear yard additions on this block, but note that to our understanding, they were constructed prior to the 1973 designation of the district. The designation report does not mention the extant conditions of the rear yard at the time of designation. 185 Dean Street is a direct benefactor of the precedent that LPC's approval of 187 set forth, except it seeks more volume. This is an opportunity to discuss a broader issue. What are the guideposts for the Landmarks Commission's regulatory stance on rear yard additions? This was a concern which the LPC grappled with during the recent rules amendment, but this application provides an instructive real-world example. On one hand, there are several similar rear yard additions within this garden core. On the other, only one of them was built under LPC oversight. Is this kind of construction appropriate because it is in the style of a historic alteration? Not all alterations, such as the stripping of facades, are necessarily appropriate. Others, such as studio windows, are protected and even sometimes reconstructed. Does the Landmarks Commission believe that the final form of a historic row house necessarily includes a rear yard addition? Should a historic rear yard addition be preserved? Generally speaking, LPC's decisions are informed by the context of the site, but in this instance, the context can be interpreted in very different ways, physically or regulatorily. We ask that the Commission discuss the issue of precedent and for the massing to be reduced in volume to be less than or equal to its neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have one more hand raised, and I will bring Marsha Patmos in. Marsha, you should be in the meeting.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hold on, let me just share myself. I don't know if I can figure out how to show myself.
We can see you as well.
Okay, perfect. Hi. Thank you so much for including me here. I've lived at 183 Dean Street since 1998. Sorry, I just ran up the stairs. And I moved here because of the quality of life. I previously lived in Manhattan where it was crowded and no green. I love it here. However, we are slowly being hemmed in from all sides. There's glaring light at night from all the tall buildings over in downtown Brooklyn, and that doesn't seem to be stopping, which is a separate issue. There's constant building noise from the largest brownstone in Brooklyn right behind us on Pacific, and now our neighbors are constantly building. 187 Dean Street was a big project, and now 185 is pending approval for this big project. The extension at 187 Dean should not be looked at as a precedent, as the neighborhood was not properly notified of the proposal at all. The backyard at 187 is mostly astroturf and changes the character of the neighborhood. This proposed extension at 185 would be even larger and more intrusive. If the 185 extension is allowed to set as a precedent, I'm concerned about what the future next door neighbors on the other side will do it, as 181 is now on the market. Living between multiple extensions would feel more like a canyon than a tree-filled respite of green out the back windows. I would also like to request a moratorium on the other extensions in the whole neighborhood, as Rosalie was discussing. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Marsha. So that is all the people who have raised their hands, and I have no one. There's one person on my list, but they did not raise their hand, and I do not see them here in the meeting. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, did we receive any additional written testimony?
Yeah, so in total, we received 19 letters in opposition, including from the Boerum Hill Association and area neighbors, including some who spoke today. And as noted, Brooklyn Community Board 2 voted to recommend denial of the application.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I just want to note that the application for 185 Dean Street was evaluated at a public hearing that was properly noticed in the city record on our website and through the community board. But we will certainly inspect it for compliance with that approval with respect to the side wall finish, the deck and rear yard changes. So Brendan, we approved a two-story addition because there were other two-story additions, but the top floor was set back on that addition, I think, to be more comparable to the depth of some of the other two-story additions, and then some additions project much less deeply. So you are proposing one that is deeper than the one that we approved and the majority of the others in the block, and we've heard about that in the testimony. Would you like to respond to that? And I think if you want to now go to image 13, You can start your response with that.
Scott, are you going to, who's controlling to go to image 13?
Scott has control of the presentation, so you can just advance backwards from this slide.
Oh, it's not working. I'm being told it's not working. Oh, here we go. Okay, no, the photograph. I think that had been the requested, yeah. So sure, I'd be happy to respond. I think, I appreciate, I really do, the argument that is being made about the size of the extension, the appropriateness within these donuts. I've obviously grown up in one of these things. I live in one of them. I've worked on them for 25 or 30 years. I get it, and I share many of the concerns that have been spoken today. However, the project, the idea with these row houses is they are capable of changing over time, and that the idea of extensions in the rear yard is something that was anticipated both in the zoning and I believe in the landmarks requirements to reflect people's the sort of changing function and use of families. Our extension is the size it is to accommodate the family activities which are planned for in the interior of the building. Our reason for the additional bulk was not for the bulk, but rather for the clean facade, the clean, sort of non-stacked facade. I'm not a big fan of tiered rear yard extensions, so I just wanted a more simple mass with the facade as designed. Scott, if you could change for a moment to the rear yard elevations that include the neighbors' properties. So, my argument here is that these rear yard extensions are to be expected as row houses evolve. I personally believe that it's best that they be kept to 2 stories. I know that some of them sometimes go up to 3 stories. I'm not a big fan of that. I think the preservation of the top 2 floors of the masonry of the inner donut wall is the most important thing, and that the facade and then bulk of the extension should be left within reason to the discretion of the architects and designers that are working on these things, and that are designing buildings that reflect the uses and needs of the age in which we live. I think that our building is appropriately scaled for this donut. I think comparing it to the adjacent donuts, I appreciate that. I think, I guess for better or for worse, given this discussion, these other houses will over time receive similar extensions. And I think in this case, we are setting a better precedent for how that extension and the bulk should be executed and articulated. Our client's garden will not have, it'll have a regular water tank in the backyard. It will not have any effect on the flow of water in the block, and the garden is planned to be heavily planted, and the roof is planned to be a green roof. So while I appreciate everything that's being said by the neighbors, and the larger argument that HDC makes about establishing precedent for rear yard additions, I think in this case we comply with the zoning, and we've created a structure which I would argue is appropriate. That's it.
Okay, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I am starting to request to unmute all of you. Oh, Commissioner Shamir Baran, please go ahead.
Just clarify that 177 was, that addition occurred before the designation, is that correct?
77.
Are you asking about the building next door, 187?
No, 177, a couple doors down. It appears to have been there the entire history of its existence.
And it is, it goes out, what is it, 14 feet plus, and does or does not step back?
It has a step back. It goes back, it and 175 go back 14. 177 goes back a full 21 feet at
Right.
one floor, at one story.
And so again, preceded the designation, is that right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
You had it there a second ago. It's the axon of the, whatever. Okay, that's the timeline, sorry.
Yeah. Or the block plan is, right, well, right, there's the timeline, but the block plan also shows the dimensions in the context. There you
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, let's have a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Oops.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is now closed and we'll begin our discussion. And I want to thank everyone who spoke today. You know, I do want to say that the commission has always found additions to be appropriate on row houses, and that expansions to the backs of row houses to be appropriate, and also additions that were constructed prior to designation have not always been, let's just say additions that were built prior to designation doesn't invalidate them as appropriate additions to the historic building. So when we look at rear yard additions, we look at the context, visibility, but even if it's not visible, we look at the context, we look at the predominant height of the rear yard additions, the predominant depth of other rear yard additions, and the general character of the block. And so we did, as we did with 185, found that there was a predominant height or many additions that were 2 stories tall, and found that height to be appropriate. Many of the additions on this side of the block do not come out that far, but there are, as was just noted, 177 and 175, which at the second floor come out to 14 feet. And then we approved a 16-foot addition on the first floor, and I guess about a 14-foot at the second floor of 185 to be sort of in keeping with those two.
187.
The proposal today, 187. Right, and 185, the proposal today for 185 is beyond the pre-existing ones as well as the commission-approved one. But we do consider the context very carefully, and so in that context, we'll start our discussion today. So Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start this one?
Okay. So, the whole discussion of context and precedent, the presence of one, the need for one, the absence of the other is a little confusing for me sometimes. So I'm trying to sort of look at this for what it is. And I am very, I think I really agree with the applicant that this approach is a very interesting approach to a rear yard addition, the kind of the, in plane rear addition facade for the 2 stories, its materiality, its kind of the material quality, which makes it a little bit lighter than the masonry, sets it up as a kind of a secondary structure, even if it is, kind of contemporary and new and likely, it will be in good shape. It's still secondary, and I think that it's a very convincing approach to these rear yard additions. And I have to say that I too think it's a stronger, cleaner, slightly quieter way to resolve these additions. In other words, as opposed to the setback, the stepped back version. And And I have to say that in the event that, as you said, Chair Carroll, that, you know, we do allow additions in the back, and because it is outside of kind of public view, there's a lot of discretion, you know, we give a lot of leeway to what they will look like. I'm imagining that there likely will be other additions on this in this donut, and I'm trying to see if they were all or many like this, would they significantly, in my mind anyway, it sort of damage the experience of the existing donut. And I have to say, no, I don't think so. So I actually think that the approach and the specific proposal is appropriate. If there was a modification, it would be to pull back the whole thing to the 14 maybe depth, and I could see that being something that would be you know, positive and would certainly be, you know, give even more space back to the donut. But I do appreciate this approach and think it's appropriate.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
Yes, I actually agree with Commissioner Spreer-Barron that the single plane edition is quieter, and I think that you know, I appreciate the testimony, but I think that these townhouses can take additions at the back as long as they're subservient and, you know, not full height. And I think that in this case, the full width can be found to be appropriate, but I think I would push it back to align with the neighbor at 185 or 187.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I was looking back out of curiosity to 185, which was actually 187, which actually was approved 10-0 apparently. So just for the benefit of the other commissioners, back in May of 2018. Because, you know, looking at it now from outside, it's very visible, but of course, anything would have been visible, I think, that close to the sort of opening there. I feel like this is too large the way it's been proposed. And listening to my fellow commissioners on the issue of not having it set back, I would then, I think that, you know, there's merit to that, but I think it is, if it's going to be 2 stories, and there are a lot of other 2-story additions, and although they're prior to designation, I think it shows a historic pattern that 2-story additions were being built. And I don't feel that comfortable with saying that a 2-story addition is not appropriate. I think it is appropriate, but I think this one pushes out too far. If it's going to be a single, plane, and it really just looms. And if you look at all the additions that are existing, it's like the largest addition in effect. And I just think that is really inappropriate. So I'd want to see it pulled back to be more in keeping with some of the other 2-story additions, rather than the current proposal. So that's where I'm at. And as far as the design, I think, as far as materiality, I'm okay with that.
Okay, and I also neglected to instruct you to comment on the front facade. So on the front, we have the aluminum clad 2/2 double hung windows, the paired doors with the transom, which won't eliminate any historic doors, but doesn't exactly replicate the historic door, and the new brackets at the windowsills.
Yeah, I could approve all of the front revisions. I think they're, you know, basically bringing the appearance back more toward an appropriate context. Then I can approve all the front.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Holford-Smith, did you want to comment on the front at all? Sorry about that.
Yes, I'm sorry, I failed to do that. I think that the changes to the doors can be found to be appropriate. They're not an exact replica, but they're similar in context. And I think the same for the brackets at the parlor floor windows. But I think that the windows, since they are seen very close, you're seeing them very, very closely, that they really should be wood windows. I think that you'll read the materiality.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, did you want to comment on the front as well?
Sorry. I agree with Commissioner Holford-Smith and meant to say it about the aluminum not, in my mind, being ideal, and wood windows in the front would be preferable.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, regarding the front, I think the sills are fine, the door is fine, appropriate. I'm actually a fan of the aluminum Marvin windows. I think they're hard to, at least for me, they're hard to discern at a distance of more than a few feet. So I'd be okay with them, although clearly if the applicant went, if the commission was generally going in the direction of wood, that would be totally fine, of course. I agree with everybody else about the position of the rear yard addition, that it should be set back to conform with the majority of other additions that are on this side of the block. And I mean, I think the testimony was interesting in that I think it operated under, an assumption about what we do here at the commission. And I think that I would just say that from me, when I look at a block, I don't think that it's automatically okay to put additions into a donut. But I think that if there is a precedent that the block has a significant number of additions already, and that is the character of the donut, that it is okay for additional homeowners to seek to do similar things. And that seems to be the case here. And I think that the direction of the comments so far have been to bring this addition in line with not just the neighbor next door, which may or may not have had some controversy associated with it in their view, but with the general tenor of the block and of their side of the block especially. This is not a pristine block. There are blocks where there are no rear yard additions, and there I personally would feel that maintaining that condition would be appropriate. But here, where there is a long-standing pattern of additions, I think that this one would be appropriate as well, as long as it conforms with that general typology.
Okay, all right, thank you. And just in terms of the sort of the predominant depth, the two-story additions closest to this come out to their second story to 14 feet. And then opposite it, there are deeper additions at 14, 15, 18 feet. Further down the block on the same side, there are many others that are only 10 feet. So, but I think this building is sort of cut off from those by the other two-story additions at 175 and 177. So just in terms of, yeah.
No, I hear you, and I think that the applicant can choose to put it anywhere in the range. Clearly here, the most obvious thing to do would be to put it adjacent to the one next door, aligning with the one next door, and that would be okay, because the one next door is, it's not alone in being at 14 feet. There are others that are at 14 feet too.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, I agree with the statement about pulling it back to align with the one next door. I'm looking at the one next door, and I'm hoping I was absent the day that was approved. Nevertheless, I strongly believe that the approach to this addition is spot on. It appears as if it was perhaps a tea room, the sort of things that you see in Brooklyn Heights, that was eventually enclosed. And I think the approach to this is completely appropriate. The materiality is appropriate. With regard to the front facade, I applaud this applicant with regard to finding a building that has lost all integrity and they're restoring it rather than demolishing it. In any case, I have issues with the metal clad windows as well, and I agree with my colleagues that they should be wood.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
He's gone, I think.
Oh, did he step out? Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bland, go ahead.
Yeah, in the front, I think it's all okay. I'm okay with the metal clad wood windows, but if others want wood, I'm fine with that as well. In the back, I think I would suggest that the whole thing just be pushed back. I think it's only 2 feet or so that it aligns with the setback, if you will, of the adjacent building. But the
okay.
But the details and the approach of this tea house enclosed is a good one, and I think the articulation of the architecture is very well done.
All right, great, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I am fine with the front. I'm also okay with the metal windows, but would support wood. I think it would look even better. And in the back, I don't have a problem with the height, the windows, or the materiality, but I do think that the entire addition should be pulled back to 14 feet.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
On the front, I think it's fine. I would prefer wood windows than aluminum, but in either case, I can approve it. In the back, I mean, what's going to happen here is that you're going to have a new precedent. If you do the box, that's what we're going to have. And if you do the pushback of the second floor, that's going to be a precedent. So I'm conflicted between that side of I think it's the north side, the south side, with the pushback. Should that be the precedent that's there now, or should this one be the new precedent? And I tend to want to stay with the plain, the new one, and just push it back 2 feet to make it align with the rest.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Align it with the one next door, so push it back 2 feet, and I am okay with the windows as they are in the front and everything else on the front. And I think the design of the rear addition, I think, is absolutely appropriate.
Okay, so and you're comfortable with the aluminum clad wood windows?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I think on similar row houses with articulated configuration like a 2/2 double hung window, we have approved aluminum clad wood before, as opposed to just a straight aluminum. So I think we do have a majority who would support the aluminum clad wood windows, and a consensus from everybody that the design is appropriate, but that it should be set back to align with the 14-foot depth of the other two-story additions. So Commissioner Shamir Baran, could you make that motion with that modification to pull the entire addition back?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 2101.
Actually, you know what? I think, sorry, I think we're not comfortable with the aluminum clad wood window, so maybe I don't want you to read the motion.
Got it.
So, okay, yep. Let me see who we can have read. Let me just read it. I'll read it. And that way I'm not putting anyone in an awkward position. Okay. In the matter of docket number 21-01526, 185 Dean Street in the Boerum Hill Historic District, a late Italianate style row house built in 1868 to 69. This is an application to alter the primary facade, replace windows, and construct a rear yard addition. And I know that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Boerum Hill Historic District. And with regard to the primary facade alterations, I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate any significant architectural features. that the proposed paired doors with arched transom will be in keeping with entrances typically found at townhouses of a similar age and style and are typical of early modifications made to row houses, including the existing doors at two houses within the row. That the proposed windows will match windows found at other buildings of a similar age and style within this historic district in terms of operation, configuration, details, and finish. That the aluminum clad material will not be discernible in that it will replicate historic details and have an appropriate finish. That the projecting bracketed cast stone sills at the parlor level are based on prototypical details found at buildings of a similar age and style within the district, and that the proposed work at the front will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Boerum Hill Historic District. And with respect to the rear facade changes, I find that the height of the proposed two-story rear addition will not overwhelm the building and will not be taller than the predominant height of existing rear additions within the block. That the upper floors of the visible rear facade will remain intact, thereby preserving the relationship between this building and the other buildings in the row. That the depth of the addition will match that of its neighbor and other two-story rear yard additions and will not diminish the block's central green space, and that the composition and materiality of the rear addition, featuring painted wood and glass window assemblies, gray stucco-clad masonry at the side facades, and a steel deck and stair, will maintain the building's residential character and is in keeping with the character of the other rear facades and additions on the block. However, I find that the proposed depth of the addition will be larger than the other additions on this side of the street at 2 stories and will overwhelm the building and its neighbors. And therefore, I recommend that the entire 2-story addition remain in a single plane and be set back to 14 feet to align with its neighbor or less. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire, would you second? No, sorry, you can't second that motion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen, I don't believe is with us at the moment. Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor, 1 not present and unopposed, the motion carries.
All right, so that's approved. With that modification, please continue to work with the staff. And we will now break for lunch, and we will take a 30-minute recess, and we will return at 1:15. Commissioners, you just need to turn your video and audio off, and we'll ask all members of the public to exit the meeting now so that you can re-enter at 1:15.